I've interviewed thousands of people, from serial killers to ministers. Welcome to the interview room.
Welcome, everybody, to the interview. Chris wanted everybody to say hi and see Buddy. A few of you were asking about him. Bud's doing well. He was doing the happy dance. Absolutely, Babs. Great to see everybody in chat. Thanks for being here.
He's a gigantic meatloaf is what he is. Buddy, buddy, buddy. Right, bud? He's sitting down here watching me because he thinks I'm going to do something with his bed. Wow, what a day, huh, Karen?
Wow. Yeah, incredible. Truly incredible.
Okay, so let's start tonight. We want to thank everybody for being here on this Monday night to talk about did the jury get it right? And we want every opinion to count. Those that think they got it right and those that don't. But let's always remember to be respectful to one another so that it doesn't turn into a food fight.
And we want to thank our mods, Miss Sophia, Mimi J2, Maui Girl, Teresa M, and Laura Waldy. We love you, ladies, and we're so grateful for all you do, and you work hard for us. Keep in chat classy, and people feel comfortable there. So thank you so much. We just love y'all. And happy Veterans Day to everyone. Big shout out to our military. We appreciate your service. And we love you guys. So thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's start off with the polls. Karen, we put up on the community page last night, how many, we had like 35 or 3,600 votes.
We did. Let me go back to that and take a look and tell them while I'm finding it, tell them what question we asked.
Do you think what's the verdict going to be? Guilty, not guilty, hung jury.
That's right. Okay, so here's the results of our poll that we put up. This was last night after our show. Yeah, so from last night, we've got just over 3,600 responses, and 34% said guilty, and 66% said either not guilty or hung jury. So
it was 34-64.
34-64. Or 66, honey. 34-66.
34-66. And tonight's poll in the chat, if you've not had an opportunity to vote, make sure you get your vote in there, because I think we're seeing a little split here.
Yeah, so the one we just put up about 30 minutes ago, only about 400 of you have voted. We asked, did the jury get it right? And on this poll is interesting. So 69% of you said yes. It's changing. 68 no, that's true, right? 69% said yes, jury got it right. 31% said no, jury did not get it right. So kind of opposite of what our other poll that started last night.
It's a flip.
So
It's a flip from last night to tonight, and that's why it's so interesting to always keep an open mind in relationship to what juries will do or will not do. And in this particular case, it's going to come down to a couple of different things. And so we want to get everybody's insight, what you were thinking, what you're feeling. There's no right or wrong other than the system has spoken, the jury has spoken. There is going to be a play for an appellate court. So, there's always that part of the system. I tell families all the time, just because a particular verdict came back, wait until it goes through the appellate process, whatever that is. And once the appellate courts have weighed in, then justice will be served. And I think this particular situation, to be honest with you, based on some of the information that I've heard, some of the information that I've seen, is ripe for an appellate challenge. Now, whether or not Indiana does it, I think there will be a move from the defense right away to ask for a new trial. I don't see this judge giving them a new trial. I see that going, no thanks, next. But there is some compelling potential exculpatory evidence. One, obviously, being some of the hair evidence that never did get, an opportunity to be, taken into consideration, i.e., why didn't they test it right when they had it? I think that could be a very damaging argument at an appellate level. I also think the fact that they kept him in a penitentiary versus a county jail, I think somebody's going to argue cruel and unusual punishment. That argument sometimes goes over very well with appellate judges to say, okay, yeah, we may or may not agree on that. And by the way, my position is the jury has spoken and we move, to whatever that next phase is, because I've seen really high profile cases. I've been involved in very high profile cases where they convicted people and it gets through the process, the whole system. The victims get lost. The families get lost in the noise. And the jury, the court say, nope, send it back. This is, some of the things procedurally that we saw were incorrect. And it goes back and things, get different. Sometimes there are new sometimes there are new trials. Sometimes the initial evidence that was presented, some of it is thrown out and a new trial is ordered, et cetera. So the jury has spoken, and there's obviously a tremendous amount of, passion, not only from the community, but, from the court. The jurors themselves are going to go home. There's going to be questions about the type of evidence that they heard. They're going to hear it on social media. This is a new day. This is the 21st century in 2024. And, I'm not saying I want a new trial. Let me put Rose up here. Okay, Rose, I'm not saying I want a new trial, but what I am saying, I've been involved in cases, this is one of them, where a new trial was ordered, and the guy that was found guilty originally was found not guilty. And this was a very high-profile case in San Diego, and they convicted him on manslaughter. Then the appellate court said, nope, send it back. Here are the problems. And he got a second trial, and that jury found him not guilty. You're looking at it. In fact, they've written books about it. I'm in all those books. I'm in movies. I'm all over the place. 48 Hours, Dateline, you name it. All were about this case.
What I think is interesting is there's always this little bit extra passion on these child killer cases, on these child murder cases by the community. And I think if there's any analogy or anything you can draw from the Stephanie Crow case that happened in San Diego County, she was a 12-year-old girl killed in her bed while she slept. And obviously, Abby and Libby were killed in their very small community in Delphi, Indiana. And so you've got obviously this community uproar, as there should be, to solve this case, to solve these cases. And that we don't see that in, let's say, spousal murder cases. One spouse kills the other. Now, yeah, of course, they're going to go through the judicial system, but I guess thank goodness we have extra passion for cases involving children. I think it shows that the community cares a lot, and it's unacceptable to have these cases just kind of sit and linger out there. So that's one thing I would say about, these cases. At times, there could be so much community pressure for prosecution, for the state to find the killer and do a trial that, and again, I'm not necessarily saying that happened here in the Delphi case. I'm just saying it's not uncommon for that to happen, that public pressure. And of course, we see it in these child murder cases.
Yeah, well said. And so, let's have an intellectual conversation about our system and the pluses and minuses, in relationship to how the system works. And Muddy Paws has a question, and thank you. I think we need to decipher the difference between not guilty and innocence. Also, I might think he was guilty, but not necessarily beyond a reasonable doubt. Very great comment. The state has proven, based on a verdict today, that there was beyond a reasonable doubt that they believed, and meaning the jury, it's not up to me. I'm not there. I have nothing to do with it. Okay, so don't get mad at me tonight, okay? Because it's whether you agree or disagree with me, that's okay. I'm good with it. But at the same time, our system is designed, whether I like it or not, again, with those scales of justice, the blindfold, and the sword. All three of those are important. Evident of the fact that last night, 3,600 people, a large majority thought he was not guilty and it would be a hung jury. And the rest of it, 30% said, no, he's guilty. So that's what jurors go through. That's what we should be going through in this, conversation. But remember, I've said, those of you that have been with us on this channel for so many years, we do not investigate people. We investigate information. And the court is going to look at all of the information that the defense is going to bring to them if they get an opportunity to go to the appellate process and say, hey, wait a minute. What information came in? What information was excluded? And what decisions did the judge make that put pressure on whether it came in or it stayed out? And that's called exculpatory evidence. And let me give you a perfect example, going back to the Crow case. Richard Tewitt had 3 centimeters of blood that belonged to Stephanie Crow on his sweater. The problem was the judge did not let, in totality, the testimony of a criminalist who transferred that blood while processing Tewitt's sweatshirt to get in front of a jury. As a result of that, he was convicted of manslaughter. The appellate court said, no, you need to retry this guy. And also, the defense did not get an opportunity to cross-examine one of the witnesses, expert witnesses, as a result of that. So it went back to a second jury. That evidence was admissible, and the jury found him not guilty. And today, the only people suffering are both families. And there was not justice for Stephanie. In fact, nobody has been arrested and put on trial for her death.
And that occurred in 1998.
And the civil...
So we're going on 27 years.
And the civil attorneys, though, went after everybody, including myself. Because while it was getting sorted out, they filed a civil lawsuit against the county of San Diego, the city of San Diego, everybody, myself. I was one of, like 50 guys that were mentioned inside of this lawsuit. And to this day, even on YouTube, even on, whatever, people still think I was guilty of doing something wrong in that case, even though I've been exonerated. So this is why I think we need to keep in mind that justice today was served based on a jury's decision for these 2 victims. But I'm going to submit to you, it's not over. It's
Chris,
not over yet.
What do you think the reaction's going to be? Delphi is a very small town, only a few thousand people. What do you think the local reaction is going to be to the jurors and the verdict as well?
Well, I think because it is such a small, close-knit community, that everybody wants the right thing to be done, in my opinion. Everybody, including the courts, the jurors, everybody in that community. But it's a mixed bag of nuts. In the courtroom, you hear cheering. I saw one report today when they came out. It was like, justice for Richard. I mean, before we even started here, there was a comment in the chat that said, Chris is going to lean on the law enforcement side tonight and, justice for Richard. And okay, Teresa, you know who you are. Okay, that's your opinion. I don't have a problem with your opinion. In fact, I respect your opinion, but, I wasn't there. I didn't make that decision. In fact, I even said, wait a minute. I've been critical of law enforcement. I heard that the superintendent had his wife with him today.
Yeah, what did you make of that? So the superintendent was a witness as well, correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, and who brings their wife to a verdict of a first-degree murder? Karen, did you ever go to a verdict with me?
Not once.
Yeah, and I worked over 300 murders. That call coming in.
So do you think it was like a community event in their mind, something to make sure you go and show up at? I mean, that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's such a small environment, and there was so much passion. Okay, where the superintendent would get on, the press conferences. I'm talking directly to the killer. You know who you are, and we're going to get you, and almost to tears at some points. Okay, that is an emotional connection. And when you have that type of emotion, then you're going down this path, and all the other static or information that's coming in, you don't want to hear it. You're moving because this is the right path. And this is one of the reasons I think also this could tip the appellate court or make it a stronger appellate challenge, is what information came in and was allowed to come in that could be exculpatory to the defendant. They're going to argue, because I've seen this, I've been part of it, I've been there, done that. I've seen good appellate defense attorneys and good appellate prosecution, give very great arguments for their positions. But the court is always going to lean towards the defendant in those types of problems. Because the court's going to say, okay, the reason you're here and the reason we're here is why. And the defense is going to say, well, Your Honor, there was additional hair. And the defense is going to say, and that hair was not tested. And the judge is going to say to the prosecution, is that true? And they're going to argue, whatever that argument's going to be. Okay? And then it's going to come back, one of the judges, depending on if it's a 3-panel judge or whatever it is, typically it's a 3-panel judge, but I do not know how Indiana works, so I'm being 100%, transparent here. But hypothetically, one of the 3 judges is going to say, well, why didn't the state test those hairs? That could be exculpatory to the defendant. And the state's going to have to answer that. I was critical of that when there was testimony that, well, why didn't you test it? Well, we may need it for later. And that's exactly what the court's going to ask. What do you mean later? You got this guy on trial now. There is no later. You're here in front of this court. Okay? You're here in front of this court. There is no later. And sometimes that's where you get the emotional aspect of things, how it pops up. And courts look at that very hard. I mean, remember, the system is about justice. Justice for who? First, the victims. But remember, when a defendant, whether we like it or not, including Brian Kohberger, the first thing the judge is going to tell a jury, you must, before you deliberate, look at this guy, and I'm being, these aren't the exact words that judges use, but they look right at the jury, the judges do, and say, Mr. So-and-so is presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in this court of law, and that will be up to the state and the defense to prove to you that he is the person, yes or no. And all of that, those jurors take that very seriously. If you've never ever been in a jury, you know you've heard that comment from the judge. And so jurors who take it seriously, they get their notebooks out and they listen intently to every single word. And before all of that, there are what they call pretrial motions, where both sides come together and they argue their position, and then they argue about the evidence that's going to come in. And if the defense is losing or if the prosecution's losing, they both lay foundation for an appellate problem. And that's why everything goes through, somebody's found guilty, and then all of a sudden you wake up and you're back in the courtroom. It may take a couple of years, but all the noise is gone. And everybody, gets out there and goes, holy cow, this is a problem. Michelle says, new trial, he confessed over 60 times.
She says, no new trial.
No new trial. Yeah, he confessed over 60 times. Yeah, we agree. However, I'm not the decider of that. What will be a big point here, if it did go to the appellate situation, is where they housed him. They put him in a prison where people who have been convicted of crimes go. The county jail system is where people who are going to trial stay. It will be argued. I will put money on it. It will be argued that it was cruel, punishment. He should not have been there. That's what they'll say. I'm not saying it. I'm saying I think that's probably what they'll say. Okay, cruel and unusual punishment. Isolation, 1 hour a day, 23 hours locked up by himself. And, they'll get other forensic psychologists to sit in with him, have him eat his Cheerios and tell us why they're not Cocoa Puffs. Okay? And they'll argue, the doctors will argue. So it's possible. It's still possible that some of that stuff will be argued at the appellate side. Thoughts, Karen?
Well, somebody had a question about the judge's gag order, and what I think is after the sentencing, which is December 20th, that gag order wouldn't make sense at that point. If he's already if he's sentenced, I have a feeling it would be lifted at that point. That judge had a clear direction, vision, and mission on keeping all cameras out, all electronics out, a relatively small number of reporters, relatively small number of people from the public. And, it's her court, and she was in her legal right to have a gag order. Not saying that we agree with it. I'm a journalist. I'm never going to want a gag order. I'm a sunshine person. The more sunshine brought to anything, a trial, an investigation, the better. But whoever answered that question, let's get past December 20th sentencing and see if that gag order is done.
So Susan says, in my opinion, the jury was able to get past any LE incompetence, judge not allowing alternative theories to look at the relevant evidence to come up with a verdict, I think they got it right. Awesome. You see, those are the great comments. These are great comments. My question is for Chris. Why do you think he tipped himself to the police in 2017? Why does he rule himself instead of being as far as possible? I don't know why he would have tipped himself off in 2017. That's typically not in his favor, and that could be argued probably by the psychologist as being psychotic. I can't tell you how many times I had people come into our office and say, "Hey, I killed them." Really? And get full confessions that they killed him. And guess what? That's not the case. Did you know that 70 or 25% of confession cases are overturned with DNA?
I
Think
believe
about
that. That
Yeah.
makes sense. It's physical evidence.
That's 1 out of
Overrides
4.
overrides a confession.
1 out of 4 that came in and said, "I did it," or they confessed that they did it, is overturned when DNA comes back. It's, that's why, eyewitness testimony is very difficult because sometimes they get it wrong. The old penny, they do a lot of things in the court, or in college, where, a lot of these behavior scientists, they have somebody run through the room, remember? And in criminal justice programs, and then they say, "What did you guys see?" Write it down on a piece of paper. Then 15 minutes later, they bring them back in. Okay. And everybody goes, "Oh man, we had red hat and the guy had, a purple hat. We had black jacket and the guy had a brown jacket." So I've been trained, as well as other investigators, that, look, you got to take your time. Okay. And you have to make sure you cross the T's and dot the I's. And that is why, again, going back to this case, I said, "Hey, wait a minute. When they arrested this guy, this was the case I was talking about yesterday about the dog. I said, you guys missed the dog hair on this guy." Okay. I think one of the other things, and Libby and Abby deserve justice. They deserve justice. That means the system, from the moment the first officer gets the call and shows up, the system needs to work for the victims and their families. But the victims, their story is what's important. And whether people don't understand, investigators, they go, "Oh, well, that may or may not be important, so I don't need it." Okay? No. You always need it. You put it in a binder, you put it in a file, and you go, maybe one day. Okay, I need it. Let me give you an example.
It's breaking out the homicide file, everybody.
This is Rebecca Jensen. 187 is homicide. 1994. This case has been adjudicated. I arrested 3 people on this murder. Here are some of my notes, my notebook. I got stuff in here that makes no sense. Nothing. Okay? But guess what? I spent over 30 days on the stand with 3 juries in a room, 45 people. Okay? When the defense said, Detective McDonough, can you tell us about A, B, C, or D? I said, just a second, counselor. Yes. I took a note about that. Here it is. And what about that, detective? Oh, yeah. At 4:00, I interviewed that person. Correct. That's right. Okay. And guess what? We won. Because I gave the defense everything, whether I liked it or not, whether it was a plus or a minus. And when you hear cases where they go, well, what about all the geofencing? And they keep it out. Meaning a judge, made a decision. Well, we don't need that. Well, guess what? You just served a hardball or threw a hardball low and inside to the defense. And they're going to pull that up. Okay. And here's a cool article. This is when I was a hostage negotiator too. You see it says negotiator up there. They were negotiating Waco at the time. And this was an article about that.
That was a few years ago.
I saved that. I must have just thrown it. I threw it in this pile here. But the point being, okay. When I heard that the firearms expert has never made a mistake, I thought to myself, really? Seriously? I can't tell you how many times the defense asked me on the stand, Detective McDonough, have you ever made a mistake? And I said, all the time. And of course, it's like, now they're going to make that a big deal in front of the jury. But jurors understand, they all understand that we're human.
People have common sense. There's nobody who believes anybody has never made a mistake, public or otherwise, professionally or otherwise. Of course, it's absurd to present somebody as an expert that has, quote, never made a mistake. And I think a jury sees right through that.
Beth asked a great question. What are the chances RA's gun matches 3 independent marks on the ejection unspent bullet found at the crime scene? Odds seem astronomical. Thoughts? Agreed. But my understanding is the testimony, she cycled 3 rounds through that gun to get to those markings. If that is the case, then that's 2 out of 3 that didn't match. That's called a flip of a coin. That's a flip, in my opinion. The courts are going to look at that. And they're going to look at the testimony, and then you have the testimony of the same weapons individual say, when asked, have you ever made a mistake? And that person says, no, I've never made a mistake. If that's the case, sign me up. I want that person every time in a courtroom as an expert. Because guess what? Everybody makes a mistake. Everybody makes mistakes. And police are no different. Investigators are no different. You guys just saw, I just trained 200 homicide detectives on the 25th of October. I had 200 of these guys in the classroom. If I would have had one person say, I've never made a mistake, I would say, you need to get to the other classroom and learn something. Because if you've never made a mistake, then why do we have books like this? Interview, interrogation, criminal confessions. Why do we have books like this? For people that have never made mistakes. We have books like this because the people that say they've never made mistakes need these books. And here's one of my old business cards. Homicide.
So I think it's interesting to point out.
I'm on a roll tonight, Bear.
You are, but I want to make a couple of points here. Yeah, exactly, Bogey. That's right. So, somebody in chat said, why don't we just accept the verdict? Us. We do accept the verdict. What we're talking about and what Chris is painstakingly sharing is that it's not over. Okay, Richard Allen hasn't been sentenced. Of course, we have that. But Chris is saying in our judicial system, defense will appeal this up to an appellate court. That's all he's saying. So we're talking about in the future what will likely happen. Okay, so I would just want to make that distinction. But for all the true crimers here, I just think it's really interesting to point out a couple things. Now, again, every jury, every trial is different. I'm not saying it's a one size fits all, not by any means. But let's go through a short list and let's look at a few unanswered questions that remained unanswered for the jury, and yet they still delivered a guilty verdict. Okay. Number one, no murder weapon. We don't know what the murder weapon is. Clearly, state never found the murder weapon. Number two, no DNA was found on the victims. Okay. And now I don't mean that Richard Allen's DNA, he cleared it off any of his clothing or whatever 5 years later. I'm talking about at the crime scene, there was no DNA for Richard Allen found on the girls. Okay. Number three, they had an incomplete testing of the hairs, as we've also just earlier talked about. And as a number of you pointed out, number four, there were a lot of law enforcement mistakes. And especially the main one I'm thinking of is when the Indiana State trooper, I don't want to say his wrong name, I forget it, but where he goes, we hear the taped confession, we hear his taped, interrogation of Richard Allen, and he's cussing at him and he goes crazy. And then he's asked on the stand, were mistakes made? And his answer was, yeah, mistakes were made. Okay. So there were a number of law enforcement mistakes that everybody knew about going into this trial. So I'm just saying, true crimers, when we hear these cases, whether we're talking about Kohberger or this one or whatever, people love to say, oh, there's no, we don't have the murder weapon. There's no DNA. Law enforcement made a ton of mistakes. They'll never convict them. Well, let's remember that for this particular case, right?
Well, and look at this comment here. This is a great comment by Beach Girl. Have you been to Carroll County and seen their jail? It wasn't, is a safekeeping because all the very rules surrounding counties could not handle him for multiple reasons. Okay. Did we not go, are you kidding me? When Kohberger's trial was transferred to Boise, and at the conclusion of that, and the reasoning for that was the judge said, well, we couldn't have handled it anyway. It took him 1.5 years, and I made it public that I thought that was a dumb thing to do, to wait 1.5 years to tell the public and to tell the family of those 4 victims, hey, all along we knew we didn't have the facilities, we didn't have this, we didn't have that to take care of him. So we were going to kick it anyway.
Well, also an important aside is weeks after they moved him to Ada County Jail, there's a Latah County press release that says, hey, everybody, we're getting rid of the Latah County Jail from the 1970s. I'm sorry. I found that highly, highly coincidental that the jail is now too decrepit to house anybody, and they got to figure that out. So, yeah, I didn't buy that when that happened. So.
Well, and even today, didn't they come out with an article today that they said the stabbing?
So that was the Idaho Statesman. Yeah, he was talking about the bench, this memorial bench for the 4 victims of the University of Idaho killings. And, we're talking about Kaylee, Maddie, Xana, and Ethan. And the headline calls them stabbing victims. Now, let me get this right. This is a quadruple murder that happened off campus in Moscow, Idaho, and you're calling them stabbing victims. Okay, so we're a little off topic, but that's the whole mentality in Moscow, Idaho, to kind of wipe the stain of the murder, if you will, off the public consciousness, right? They destroyed the crime. They got rid of bulldozed the crime scene house. They kicked the whole case to Ada County, 300 miles away. They got Koberger out of the Latah County Jail. And, now they're talking about memorial things for the victims, and they're calling them stabbing victims to lessen the whole thing. So we were fairly disgusted, to be honest with you, with that. It's just not right.
Yeah, and DNA is not always right. I mean, DNA is not always, a game changer. This case right here, no DNA, 0, zilch. Okay, 3 convictions. Believe it or not, they're out now. They got out after, serving their time. Good for them. I hope they're rehabbed. But the point being, you don't always need DNA. No, never. But then you have to then look at the other types of evidence. What other evidence is there? Is there a digital footprint? Okay, fine. Put it in front of a jury. What does the digital footprint tell us? If he's not there, it will tell us that. That should be a no-brainer. If he's kind of there, that will tell us that as well. Okay? If others are there, that's important information, because remember, we're not investigating people, we're investigating information that will lead us to people. And this is why the why question is always brought in. Why did the judge leave it out? What was the reason for that? And because the defense is, they're gonna argue, well, it was exculpatory, Your Honor. It can, it goes towards this other, theory that we had about these other people, Odinism and everything coming together. And that's where I'm saying they'll use that in the appellate courts. And that's why the trial court should just eliminate this right away, just eliminate it. When you have a criminalist get up there, a lab technician and be asked the question, hey, can I ask you, isn't it true there was extra hair? Yes. Why didn't you test that hair? Well, we want to keep it just in case. In case what? That's what a defense attorney would say. Why? And this one of the things, and one of the things that folks know who knew me and know me, even in San Diego, who know me in San Diego County, they would say, McDonough, you think like a defense attorney, and that's what makes you dangerous. And I would say, okay, whatever that means. But, yeah, I do think I try to think of all the problems and then put them on the table. and say, okay, what are the solutions for these problems? We've got this, 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 and this. How can we explain this? Because that's my job. Because these girls deserve all of the solutions. That's how you get a conviction, and there is never somebody to step in and overturn it, ever. In this case, I said to the DA, what about the dog hair? Why, if this guy is hiding in that house for 20 minutes, does he not have dog hair with a dog in the house wearing a wool sweater? The victim had dog hair in her hands, who was murdered in her bed. The mother had dog hair in her clothing. The father had dog hair on his clothing. The brother had dog hair on his clothing. The grandmother had dog hair on her clothing. Everybody in that house had dog hair. And I said to the DA, the most important witness in this case has never been interviewed, and it's the dog. And I went as far as to say, take the dog hair, if you find it, and do a DNA on the dog in the house. I had a case in one time, there was a turd in the toilet. And I said to the criminalist, her name is Cheryl, and Cheryl, if you're listening, still forgive me. I looked at her and I said, take a swab of that turd. And she goes, what? I said, take a swab of the turd, please. Now, long story short, that turd belonged to the suspect. And we matched the DNA. It was a perfect match to Turd Man. Okay. These are the things that are small, but they're significant. And when you get questions, you just have to say, okay, this could be something, that's bigger. We used to take the air filter out of every car from a suspect. And those of you that have been with this channel for a long time, okay, you can take all of the pollen and all this other stuff out of that air filter. And if you have a case like this where the body was dumped and you took his air filter out of that car, guess what? You can go back and say, hey, guess what? This pollen, is consistent with this area. And everybody goes, mind blow. And you walk into the suspect and you say, can you explain how this in your air filter got into your car? It's consistent with the same type of botany information in the area where the body was found. Mind blow. Okay. And in this, my understanding is you have a footprint, a digital footprint. Who it belongs to, I don't know. But what you're trying to do is get everybody out of the circle, i.e. Mr. Allen or whoever, get him out of the circle if he's not our guy, or put him in the circle if he is our guy. Get him in there. Let's keep him there. And how do we keep him in the circle? How do we keep him there? Well, we got pollen. Well, we've got this digital footprint. Okay, all of these other things start happening and you go, okay, we may be onto something here. Okay, now what about this other guy, this clown guy? How's he in this circle here? Why is he in the circle? Well, he was communicating with the girls. What do you mean he was communicating with the girls? Yeah, he had this, this fake persona of this real handsome guy. Then they were, communicating. Well, where was he? Where was he that day? He was there. He was around there. Really? Why is that? Do we know why that is, right? You want to have your team kind of refocus and say, why is this guy in the circle? How did he get here? How did we find out about him? What's his game? What's his game? And, then you start looking for, the other psychological things. You start looking for the behavior patterns of who would do this, that kind of stuff. And so, those are just some of the things that I think we all need to, to continue to think about, because my opinion tonight, I could be wrong because I make mistakes, is that I think the defense will have grounds for an appeal. I don't think they're going to get a new trial. They're going to ask the trial judge, Your Honor, blah, blah, and the court's going to go, no, thanks. Been there, done that. But at the same time, there are going to be other things I think that will be put into motions. And so let me answer Yarn Gal here. Chris, what are your thoughts about the large LE presence when the verdict was read? I heard they brought in about 40 officers. I think that obviously is just for security purposes in relationship to, because this is somewhat of such a high profile case, even on a national level, that they don't know what kind of exterior threats they could have. Okay. And so I think they just erred on the side of caution. So I don't have a problem with that. I think that maybe was a pretty good move. Karen, any thoughts coming to you?
And I would reiterate what we said earlier. I mean, of course, we accept the verdict. The jury reached it, and we respect that. I just find it really interesting. It's a good reminder for me, and maybe you guys too, that you can have a guilty verdict and still have so many unanswered questions about a case. I think that's kind of an important point here, right? I mean, we're still talking about, Klein, Ron Logan to some extent, unfortunately, we don't get every answer all neatly packaged in a guilty verdict in this case. A lot of us who've got just inquisitive minds about this, not that we don't accept the verdict, we do, but there's still so many unanswered questions. And I don't know. I mean, you guys tell us what you think. There's a little bit of, we're very happy that justice has been served for Abby and Libby's families, first and foremost. There's also kind of this sense of, wow, there are so many questions. What about this? What about that? Are we never going to find out? What if this does go up to an appellate court and the appellate court stays it and says, no, the jury got it right. Anything is possible, really. I think for all of us who's obviously been following this for years, there's just a little bit of unsatisfaction in not getting all of our questions answered. But
Yeah,
tell us what you guys think.
Yeah, and I think Elaine's thought here sounds like I think prosecution did an inadequate job, according to me. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying these questions should not exist at the end. And
that's a good point. That's a really good point, Chris.
If these questions exist at the end, then the public thinks they haven't done a good job. It's not me. When you have a poll of 70% almost say, we're not sure, that is a reflection of law enforcement doing a good job. When you have law enforcement investigating multiple people, like Klein, like Logan, like, everybody here, Alan, who just pops up, 6 years later, 7 years later, whatever it was, he all of a sudden pops into the environment. And then you find out that he may have been the one to instigate it. you go, okay, well, how did that happen? What happened here? What's going on here? And then you shift your entire focus. And when you have an investigative team are going at each other, well, we think it's this guy, and we need to keep going down this lane. And they say, no, we think it's this guy. We need to go down this lane. Well, guess what? That's why they bring us in. That's one of the reasons, I just got back from North Carolina to talk about, hey, the reason some of the things we need to do, and these are great investigators over there, by the way. They're awesome. Okay. But it's because, you start taking a look at things like this, and this is my case file, by the way. Okay. Of all the murders I worked, okay, here they are. They're all here. Okay. And it says right here, case log, Detective McDonough. Okay. This is a lot of mistakes learned. And my responsibility is the greatest gift you can ever give is, lifting somebody else up. And a gift has no value unless you give it away. And I had this experience many, many years ago, and I've shared this many times about Jigsaw John, where I saw him at a conference. He was getting near his retirement. The guy spent 43 years in homicide in LAPD. The guy, 43 years in homicide. That guy had an amazing amount of information. And when I went and I sat with him real fast, many of you have heard this. And the first question he asked me, because I asked him, I said, Jigsaw, what is your secret? And he looked over at me, he used, do you really want to know? And I said, yes, sir. I want to know what your secret is. And I've only been in homicide for, I think, a year or two at that point. This had to be either 91 or 92 at that time. And I spent 13 years in homicide. So this was early on in my career. And he looked at me right in the eyes and he says, okay, I'm going to ask you a question. I said, what is that, sir? Are you teachable? That was the question. And at first I hesitated, I hamina, the old curly shuffle, I wasn't sure how my ego was going to answer that. Right. And he looks at me again and he said, I'm going to ask you again, are you teachable? And I said, yes, sir. I believe I am. He goes, nope, wrong answer. Are you teachable? And I said, yes, I'm teachable. He said, okay, I'm going to give you some ideas. And all of a sudden, mind blow, okay, he taught me some things that ended up blessing my life, blessing their lives and others, hundreds of victims. I had a 90% solvability rate in my career. Now that means 9 out of 10 times I knew you did it. It didn't mean I could put a set of bracelets on you. It just means because I didn't have enough information. I needed more. I had to be patient. There are cases that are still very patient. This is Veterans Day. I have a Marine that was executed in his car that is still not solved. It's solved. We know who did it, but we don't have the evidence to hook him up. I have a little girl whose family, a couple of weeks ago, Karen, reached out, sent me an email. Leticia?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Leticia Hernandez, December 16th, 1989. It's embedded here. We know who did it. We don't have enough to push him down, okay, and put bracelets on him. And that's where experience comes in, not mine, but agencies, they have to throw the best experience at these kind of cases because they're such high profile because the victims 100% deserve the win. And the kind of cases that don't go to the appellate courts are the wins. That they're just slam dunk. The cops did everything right. They threw everything onto the table. The defense saw it. The defense brought it up. The defense argued about it. Yada, yada. Okay. The jury saw it. The jury smelled it. The jury heard it. What do you think is going to happen the very first day? One juror says, in the Brian Koberger case, we'll just shift gears for 30 seconds. You know, I'd like to see the house. Because we're in Boise. We're 3 hours away. I'd like to go see that house. I said in the very beginning, that house will be an issue. And guess what? We didn't know they were going to move it to Boise at that time. You know, so it's important that everybody gets it right. Everybody gets it right. I got another question here, Karen. If RA's conviction is challenged because of prison conditions, won't that open the door to appeals for other inmates?
Only if other inmates were held in a maximum security prison prior to their trial, when the norm is to be held at a county jail. So that's how I would answer that. I don't think there's too many examples of that. Not saying it hasn't ever happened or can't, but this was a very public example of that, which is highly unusual.
Yeah, great answer. We got another one here. There wasn't DNA found in Chad Daybell's trial either, but we know good and well the tools used to bury JJ and cut up the burn tile belonged to him. They were found in his garage, but he cleaned them.
And we're not saying DNA is necessary in every case to get a conviction. Please don't misinterpret that. That's not what we're saying at all. What I'm saying is I just went back to a list of things that were not present or present, and the jury returned a guilty verdict. That was my only thought on that. I just want to say one thing as well. I know a number of you in chat have a difference of opinion of us, and we're glad you're here and we welcome your opinion. But the thing is, we're going to be honest with you. I promise you, Chris and I are not going to get up here and lie to you at all. We're not going to do it. And so everything that he's saying, everything that I'm saying is based on experience. You know, Chris has actually investigated, hundreds of murders over the years, testified in countless trials, and has been in the thick of these type of trials better part of 40 years. And so, we're grateful we can bring that experience to you guys, but we're not going to sit here and go, oh, it's a happy, glorious day with the verdict. We're saying we accept the verdict. Absolutely. We pray and our hearts go out to Abby and Libby's families. Obviously, we want them to have justice. But we're also not going to lie to you and say the process is over after sentencing. This most likely, well, I don't think it's speculation, so I disagree. Thank you for your opinion, Charlie, but we're not speculating. We're talking about this. If Chris didn't spend 40 years as a homicide detective, if he was, I don't know, a pilot or served warrants and never worked a murder, okay. But
let's talk
he has
about
experience.
Let's talk about the baby recently. So I was called and asked. A mother was in custody in Alaska for suffocating her child, a small baby. And I got a phone call from the defense who said, hey, Detective McDonough, would you take a look at this case? And I said, well, what's the case? And they told me. And I said, okay, I'll take a look at it. And so I get all the photos, just kind of like this guy got hired to look at all the crime scene photos and do a blood spatter analysis. And they say, detective, what's your opinion? And I said, well, where is the bib? And the medical examiner, the lead investigator, the defense, everybody said, what bib? And I said, the one around the baby's neck when the child was presented to the ER room. And they said, let us check. And I said, well, you don't have to check. It's on picture number 32, whatever it was. And it's sitting on the chair that the doctors, when they removed all the clothing and they went to CPR on the child, it's sitting right there. Where is that bib? And they said, we don't know. We can't find it. It's no, blah, blah, blah. Nobody discovered it. Nobody collected it. And I said, well, what about the bottom of the bib? Is there anything on that bib? I'd like to see that bib. So I called the defense attorney and the client and said, where did they buy that bib? And they told us. And I said, okay. I went out and bought one. I found it. And at the bottom was a piece of plastic. Okay. And on that plastic were these diamond shapes. Okay. And I looked at the autopsy photos of the baby because my expertise is children. And I saw right here an indentation that matched that piece of plastic. And I said, hey, we'd like to talk to the medical examiner's office. So we get into this conversation. The ME's on the phone. By the way, there were 3 medical examiners. Everybody looks at it. And I asked him, I said, if the child is learning because she was just, an infant, if she doesn't have enough dexterity to roll correctly, could she roll over accidentally? And could she, because there was also liquid on the bib, could she inhale that bib and could she accidentally suffocate? Is that a possibility? They said, let us look at it again. Every single one of them came back and said, we cannot eliminate that as the cause of death. Now think about that. They have a mother in custody, the government does, who was saying, no, I'm going to look it up because I can tell you now. Here it is. I just found it. She was a Coast Guard officer. Her name is Katie. Here's the case. She was sentenced to 6 years for the death of her 5-month-old daughter and her conviction overturned on appeal due to charging documents, as well as it goes on to talk about an autopsy found the infant's death was consistent with asphyxiation due to a prone position in the infant in the bedding. And then they go on to talk about how it was overturned because they could not prove that that child accidentally passed away in that crib, and the mother had nothing to do with it. In fact, she wasn't even in the room. She was out shopping, and she came home and found her baby dead. And the state came in and said, no, you suffocated that child. I got retained to take a look at it. I asked one question: where's the bib? And in this case, I respect the jury's verdict, but I suspect that one question that will be asked by the defense to the appellate court is, why didn't they test that other hair? Why didn't they allow all of this digital evidence come in, the geofencing? Why was Klein up there in the first place? How did we eliminate him? Okay, how did we eliminate him? Blah, blah, blah. And the list will go on. I'm not a defense attorney. I just, I'm like you. I want justice for these two children. Just like I wanted justice for that baby that I just showed you. I wanted justice for her because I wanted the truth to be told. I seek the truth, whatever it is. I wanted the mother to have the truth. I wanted their team. I wanted the prosecution to have the truth. Okay? And I testified in that trial. And the prosecution asked me, well, why are you testifying for the defense? And my answer was, because I'm telling the truth. There's another, the truth hurts sometimes. Sometimes the truth stinks. It's just, you're kidding. Yeah, I'm sorry. This happened, and the reason it happened is because, blah, blah, blah. And that is the investigator's responsibility. That is an investigator's responsibility, and it's not speculation. It's speculation. Yeah, I guess we can say that if you talk about things on YouTube, everybody goes, you don't know, blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. You're entitled to that opinion. Okay, we don't have a problem there. Karen and I, we never have a problem with any of that, but we don't disrespect you. Okay. If you're a wedding planner, I don't show up at your wedding and tell you how to plan it. Okay. At all. I try not to. In fact, I'd be really dumb at it. Karen would be good at it, but not me. Okay. And that's why we have on this channel a philosophy that the truth and justice for the family and justice for the victims is first and foremost. Okay. First and foremost. Okay. Have you ever come across a case where an individual has confessed 61 times? No. No. And don't we think that could be a red flag? Depending on their psychological state? Like we mentioned a little bit earlier, remember, 25% of confession cases, if you think about that, that's a big number. Okay. That's 25 out of 100 people. When the DNA comes back, the DNA says, no, they're not the killer. Okay. I can't tell you how many times you guys have seen my coffee cups back here of how many times people show up and they say, hey, by the way, I did it. And you go, okay, yeah, sure. And how did you do it? And then next thing you know, all they're doing is regurgitating what's been out there in the environment, in the public. And you go, you know what? Come back tomorrow and see if you did it then. Let's see what happens. We'll take your name, we'll take your information, we'll take your story. Okay. And then when you do find the right guy, you hand that over to the defense, in your notebook. Fruit Loops came in at, so-and-so date at so-and-such a time. And by the way, he's also landed, a rocket on Mars. Just FYI, you may want to put him on your witness list and send it over to them. Okay. And then their investigator follows up and calls Fruit Loops and says, hey, did you do this? And he says, yeah, last week I did, but this week I didn't. Okay, that's a problem. And you start seeing these things. What's the consistency of these stories? There's a great doctor, Dr. Offshee. He's done tremendous amount of research on these guys. And but that's a good one. I got another one up here, Karen. What are your thoughts? I see you go. Your mind's going on.
No, I mean, we're raising legitimate questions, and it should always be okay to ask the questions, whatever the verdict is, on any case.
Yeah, Thomas.
That's a good point, Thomas.
Yeah, how many people confess to John Bonet's murder, right? Just to get into a book. There are people out there. I mean, think about it. How many people are in love with Brian Kohberger? Now, in that case, there is DNA. But there are people that love him. They're in love with Brian Kohberger. People were in love with Ted Bundy. Richard Ramirez. There are women that would marry him, okay, in prison. Okay. They have they have visits where the women can come in and the inmates can hook up and do whatever they want to do. Okay, well, guess what? That is proof, okay, that the natural selection process is invalid. Because
in your opinion,
just my opinion, okay, just my opinion, okay, which is 50-50, by the way, 50-50, okay, and Tess has rescue fantasies. Here you go. Thank you. Or T. Thank you. I love it. The jury fulfilled its duty. The 12 jurors listened to the evidence, applied the law, and reached a verdict. We agree. That's correct. 1,000%. We agree. One more. Chris, what case haunts you to this day that you're not able to solve? The case that sticks with me, well, there are two cases. One, we've actually solved it. We can't arrest the guy, and that's Leticia Hernandez. And the second was a little boy who, it was a shaking baby case, and the jury believed that the suspect was burping the child. Yet the evidence showed that the child was viciously shaken. He was 14 months, and that case has been with me for 25 years. I still see him every single time I think about it, including right now. There was no justice for that child. But the suspect, the court spoke. The jury spoke. And the jury said, we, the jury, find him not guilty. And so when people are, critiquing or criticizing me about this, whether I agree with the jury or not, no, you're wrong. Okay. The jury spoke. I agree with them. It goes on. it doesn't mean they were right or wrong. That's why we have the system. And the system in of itself will, take care of whatever needs to be, cleaned up if there's anything there. Whatever it may or may not be. I don't know. But at this point, Richard Allen has been convicted of 4 counts of murder. And he will pay the price for that. But you also have to remember the defense isn't done. Okay, whether, we may think it's over. It's not over. The defense is going to file motions. Now, whether or not they get a new trial, I don't see this judge saying, yes, okay, no problem, let's try this again. No. Then the defense is going to look past that and go, okay, what are our appellate, what are our appellate positions? Boom, 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 boom. And then they're going to try to get it to the appellate courts. And that appellate court is a new jury, quote unquote, just for lack of a better term. It's a new set of eyes. And they're going to look at that if it gets to that point, and they may turn around and say, you know what? We got to tell you guys, what's that, sir, ma'am? Hey, you're going to have to look at these other issues, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Very slim chance for an appellate, for an appeal. Yeah, but here are the key words in your comment, Morgan. Very slim chance. Okay. I've been in this business 42 years, 25 in the game, 13 in homicide. And that word, a chance, when you look at this one, that word chance worked. And, the guy got a new trial. End of story. And he was found not guilty. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen here. Don't misunderstand me. But the chance is there. That's what I'm saying. And the fact that, what's our poll now, Karen, on whether the jury got it right tonight?
Let's take a look, and I'll tell you in a minute. So we're still for tonight's poll, we've got just over 1,700 people who weighed in, and 66% said yes, the jury got it right.
Okay.
34% said no.
How much said no?
66% yes.
Okay.
34 no.
Okay, so 34% didn't agree with the verdict. All right. That's a chance. That's a chance, unfortunately. Where I love the kind of cases where it's like 100% or high 90s, high 80s, way up there, that says, no, this guy's toast. Okay. End of story. Because that tells us that number is so close, but we want that number up here. We want it to move closer to that 100% mark so that, we can get to this place where we go, okay, the next big one to watch, coming up here, obviously, Looney Tune Lori Vallow is coming up pretty soon. We got some more hearings on Brian Koberger coming up. I mean, the judge just recently let him wear his suits and everything like that.
And we're waiting to hear back on whether the defense was successful in kicking the death penalty off the table.
Yeah.
We have to waiting for the judge to decide that.
Yeah. So those are going to be, this is a great point too. Every channel, very different polls depending on how they present their opinions and lives. Welcome to human behavior, right? Under your scars. Yeah, isn't that a great thing for America, that everybody gets an opinion, and those opinions can be right or they could be wrong. That's exactly what it's like sitting in that jury box. Hopefully you get an opportunity to sit in a jury box again if you've already done it, because you're the kind of person that's great. You keep an open mind. Depends on how it's presented. That's exactly what a courtroom is. Polls are no different than courtrooms. They look at the evidence and they balance it, whether or not, that's good or that's bad. So, any other closing thoughts, Karen?
Just that our thoughts and prayers are always with the victims' families. And tonight, we hope that Libby's family and Abby's families, we just hope that they feel that justice is served.
Yep. 100%. And thank you, all of our veterans, again on this wonderful Veterans Day. God bless you all, each and every one of you. Thank you for your service. Shout out to my cousins. All of you, you know who you are. Thank you for your service. The Dennehy's, the Delvecchios. We love you guys. And aloha. See you on the next one, everybody.
Hard working every day, I'm stressed out 24/7, babe. No timeouts, wish we could fly away. You and I go to our favorite place. Oh yeah, make special memories together. I'll be your company now and forever. I say we fly away, you and me, go to our favorite place. Feeling the sun on my face in Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. I need a summer breeze, some fresh air to put my mind at ease. No cares. You wanna come with me? Me and you go to our favorite tree. Are you ready now? We jump on a plane now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. Don't hesitate now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. We'll never come down. We're going away. Yeah, we're going away. You and me. Feeling the sun on my face in a way.